Imagine, if you will, you decide you need to purchase a new car. So you go to the dealership, you pick one out, find one for the right price that fits you. You think it's a great car, you even love the color. So you decide, I'm going to buy this car. They hand you a user license agreement. And as part of that agreement, they say that they can revoke your access to the car at any time of their choosing. And should they decide for any reason to terminate your access to the car, you're required to destroy the car in your possession.
Oh my God!
This is exactly what many publishers and developers put in their end-user license agreements for games.
And it needs to stop.
I'm Fox with RealMarcFoxx, your vanguard of the gaming, grifting, and gooning brigade. Roll the intro.
I'm as mad as hell, and I'm not gonna take this anymore!
So yes, that's right, you heard me correctly. In many of the end-user license agreements, or EULAs, E-U-L-A's, that you have to accept or agree to in order to play many modern games, there's actually a clause that should they terminate your access to the game or disable the game for any reason, you are required to destroy all copies of the game that you have. That would include, of course, deleting them from your computer, but at the same time, if you're required to destroy all copies, what do you do if you have a physical copy of the game? For example, what if you got a physical copy of the Twisted Tales of Spike McFang and you purchase it, and then you're told that when they revoke your access, when they decide to disable the game by taking away the server check-ins, you have to destroy your copy. Does that mean that you take the actual game and, I don't know, what do? Cut it with scissors? Smash it with a hammer? Throw it in the fire? Shred the disc? Is this not ridiculous? Does this not strike any of you as way, way overboard and proof positive that we need more legislation to protect consumers from these incredibly inappropriate, improper, and restrictive end-user license agreements?
Oh yeah, baby!
While I will do a full video on the Stop Killing Games petition, I'm waiting till we get closer to the deadline. It is over 1 million signatures, however, as many as 250,000 or more of those signatures might be invalidated because people either filled out their name incorrectly by spelling it wrong or using a nickname or abbreviation such as saying Bill Williams instead of William Williams, although I hope that wouldn't be anyone's real name. Or people could be making fake signatures. They don't even live within the European Union's borders. Or it could be bots that are just auto-signing junk on there in order to give the illusion that we have the signatures we need. So keep signing, keep spreading the word. And remember, you can only sign that EU petition if you are a European Union citizen. But we're talking today about end-user license agreement clauses that actually require you, according to these clauses, by civil law, not criminal. You're not going to be charged with a crime if you don't follow these. This is all civil stuff. This is all basically stuff between you and another party. It doesn't involve the criminal aspect of things. The police are not going to come to your home because you violated an end-user license agreement. But they require you to
Destroy
all copies of the game that you own. Now, obviously, there's no way for Ubisoft to come and force this. Ubisoft is not going to know if you keep a copy of Assassin's Creed shit show in your house. They're not going to know if you've destroyed it. They're not going to know if you've destroyed any of their games or even uninstalled them from your computer unless you're logging in and they can see that and then they deactivate it from their end. But as far as I know, they can't forcibly uninstall it unless Steam or their client, obviously, Uplay, does the installation, or on installation in this case, for you. However, this clause is actually in a lot more publishers and developers' games than you might first think. It's not just Ubisoft. We've also found that Larian has a clause in there. They specify that only you can end the agreement because you have to notify them, but if you do end the agreement, you have to destroy your copies of the game. Similarly to Bandai Namco with Elden Ring, they say if you terminate the agreement for any reason, you must destroy all copies of the game. Square Enix with Final Fantasy XIV, Genshin Impact, Bethesda with The Elder Scrolls 4 Oblivion, Call of Duty from Activision, there's Yakuza, all the Yakuza games, the Persona games. In general, according to this Reddit post, all Sega games tend to have a destroy all copies message in their EULA, including Metaphor ReFantazio. In addition, it's in No Man's Sky's end-user license agreement, as well as Star Wars Jedi Fallen Order and Warhammer 40,000 Space Marine 2. And this is not a complete or total list. It's not exhaustive. This is just a list of a few cases that this particular user found. I've checked into these. They do check out as far as the research that I've done. So we've got game publishers, indoor developers, telling you that in most cases, not only can they revoke your access to the game at any time for any reason, or in some cases they say no reason at all, they require you to destroy your copies of the game. Now, obviously, if you don't uninstall the game or if you don't break your disc in some way, scratch it with a knife or whatever the case is, I don't think there's really much of a recourse they have. I'm not even sure these clauses are legal, and this is why it is helpful to get regulations on these businesses. Many of you are thinking, Fox, last thing I want is for the government to be more involved in video games. We've seen what can happen when the government gets involved, right? Well, here's the thing.
The government is already involved.
The point of this petition, Stop Killing Games, and the point of fighting against EULAs like this is not to get so-called more government regulation, but to simply say that you as a consumer have rights, and that would also prohibit the government from coming in and doing any of these things, or the government from protecting publishers and developers who do these horrible, awful practices. Another thing to consider is that without any government regulations or laws prohibiting these practices, you're putting all of the power in the hands of the publishers and the developers. And do you trust these big, huge, multi-million, multi-billion-dollar publishers to have your best interests in mind? I once read about game preservation on a website, and according to one guy who said that it's actually very hard to track, he thought as much as 60 to 70% of all games ever created have no means by which you can legally acquire and play them. Many of them are completely lost to time. We don't know if these are on someone's computer somewhere, but there are many, many games that have been just completely lost to history. They're gone. You can't access them. You can't download them. There's no legal way to play them. And you may be able to find some of them on pirate websites and the such, but there's all sorts of risks with that because you could get malware, viruses, and just visiting these websites can sometimes cause issues. I get it, many of you don't want the government involved. I used to feel the same way myself, but I've realized now that you basically have two options. Either you get the government to help protect your rights, or the government will help ensure that corporations, publishers, developers, and all sorts of other parties who don't have your best interests in mind can trample all over you, and there's nothing you can do about it. Because as it stands now, you can buy a game, even if it has no online component, download it, go to play it, and they can immediately revoke your access with no refund, no recourse. There's nothing you can do. There's no one you can go to. There's no one you can plead to for assistance other than maybe whoever you bought it from. You could ask Steam for a refund, but they can decline you. They typically don't. You could try to get a refund from Sony, but that's not always easy. You could try to get a refund from Nintendo. The problem is you're at the mercy of these corporations as to whether they want to give you a refund or not. There is a case where Ubisoft disabled the server check-ins for an Assassin's Creed title, but continued to sell it on Steam, even though the game was literally unplayable. It would not launch. But you know how you can get it to launch? Well, you can find it at alternative sources on the internet. I'm not going to suggest any. You definitely shouldn't break the law in any way. You should always legally play your games. But the problem here we're running into is that these end-user license agreements are giving corporations all of the rights and people basically none whatsoever. Not only is this bad for us as gamers, but this leads to a future where games can be completely lost to time. They can disappear, never be accessible again, and if the publisher doesn't re-release them, they're gone. That's it. There's no hope of getting them back, especially games that do constant online check-ins and are always connected to servers, even though they don't have to be because they're essentially offline experiences. Let me ask you this. Imagine, if you will, From Software decides to shut down the servers for Demon's Souls, as I believe they said they were going to for the PS3. I don't know if they actually have by now. I haven't played the PS3 version in a while. But they're going to shut down the servers for Demon's Souls on the PlayStation 3. They're going to shut down the servers for Demon's Souls on the PlayStation 5. In sync with that, they decide to revoke everyone's access. Not only are the servers going down, they're taking the game away completely. It just disappears from your game library on the PlayStation 5. It just is inactive in your library on the PS3, and you can no longer play it legally in any way, shape, or form. Now, if there's not an emulator available for that system yet, you couldn't even have any hope of trying to pirate the software and download it and use it because there's no emulator for it. A lot of games have been lost to time. And you know, the thing about game preservation is we're trying to preserve these games for posterity, not just to play and enjoy, but to see where games have come as pieces of history, as pieces of culture. And sure, a lot of the games aren't that important. They're not super valuable paintings or anything of the sort. They're not great works of literature. But why wouldn't we want to maintain aspects of our culture? Why wouldn't we want to maintain entertainment that's been created for posterity for future generations to see? There's all sorts of fun and interesting things we can do with that. We can look back at history and see how far we've come. We can learn from the past. We can see what people used to do and play in the past. But if these games get taken away, they just get deactivated remotely by the publisher. We can't. Now, why is it that publishers are just deactivating games when they don't need to? Are they just mean? Well, I don't think so necessarily. I think they're basically, number one, lazy. They don't want to have to pay for anything more than they absolutely have to, which is why it would help to have some sort of regulation that says they can't just take it away forever. Number two, they want to move on to other stuff, and if they leave that game available to you, well, you could continue to play it. And if you continue to play an older game that you enjoy, you're that much less likely to buy a newer game, especially if it doesn't seem as good as the past ones. Now imagine right now that Ubisoft revoked your access, revoked your ability to play any previous Assassin's Creed game. Might that increase the likelihood that you just give in and buy Assassin's Creed Shadows, even though you've heard all this terrible stuff about it and it's not really that great of a game? Well, it's possible. If you just really, really want an Assassin's Creed game, but you can't access any of the previous ones, you might buy the new one. And especially for PC gamers, if you're a PC gamer, it's so easy to play older games. It's so easy to play them at higher settings, higher frame rate with mods and all that. You might consider not buying the new game if you can just go back to the old one. After all, if Bethesda were to go ahead and just suddenly revoke your access to the old Oblivion game, the original Oblivion 4, if they were to revoke your access to Skyrim, I think we'd all be a lot more likely to buy the Elder Scrolls 6, even if it didn't look that great, because we can't play those two older ones. I think it's important for us to keep an eye on what's showing up in these EULAs, end user license agreements, because some of this stuff is so absurd that if we create enough of a backlash, they might actually take them out. If you remember when PayPal updated their terms of service to say that they could essentially deduct money from your account if you said or did anything that they considered as harming their brand, they could just take money away from you to try to get compensation for the damage you've done to their brand. They then took it out. I've heard they since covertly put it back in and tried to dodge the controversy by pretending it was gone and then slowly, quietly kind of sneak it back in there. But the idea here is, if there's no backlash from the consumer, there's no change. If the consumers don't stand up and say something, the publishers, the developers, these corporations will continue to run roughshod over us. And if you care about gamers, if you care about gaming, if you care about game preservation and game history, you should care about what these EULAs say, and you should care about the fact that they are continuing to kill games, in some cases completely unnecessarily, and in other cases because they just don't want to put in that tiniest, smallest little bit of effort to keep the game available for players to continue to enjoy. But what do you guys think about EULA clauses telling you that you have to destroy all copies of your games? Do you support this? Do you think this is a good idea? Do you think this laissez-faire approach to all this, so that the market will just sort it all out and we don't need to involve the government at all? Or do you think people should sign the petition if they're a European Union citizen so that we can get some sort of consumer protection rights for gamers? I think you know what side of the debate I fall on, but I definitely want to hear your comments down below. Like or dislike the video as appropriate. Make sure to subscribe subscribe, notification bell icon, and all that jazz. And as always, my friends, stay real, keep playing, and never forget, yesterday's tomorrow is today's today. See you in the next one.